We're live, we're ready to go?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome everyone to this regular meeting on Monday evening, March 15th. And I'd like everybody to please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And Madam Clerk, can you please call roll?
With pleasure, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Goethals.
Here.
Councilmember Pappen.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Bonilla.
Here.
Mayor Rodriguez.
Here. All right, well, today marks the year anniversary of our city entering in its shelter in place. And it is hard to believe that a year has passed already, but our city and community has not been at all standing still. And Samantha Weigel and our communications team has put together a great video highlighting some of the accomplishments that we've had this past year. And we are going to open this meeting by playing that video for you today. The past year has brought many challenges, but we've gotten through it because we've come together as a community. On March 16, 2020, the nation's first shelter-in-place orders began here in the Bay Area. And the city of San Mateo proclaimed a local emergency and opened a multi-agency emergency operations center. We helped set up COVID-19 testing in some of our most vulnerable neighborhoods, and we're working with our partners at the county to support vaccination sites in our city. From our wastewater treatment plant crew to city planners and our firefighters to librarians, we've been working behind the scenes to make sure we provide essential services to our community. We also knew we needed to do more to help some of our most at-risk residents to stay safe and healthy. With the help of our city staff, local volunteers, we served over 7,800 meals to local seniors who were at significant risk from COVID-19. Throughout the year, we made nearly 1,500 wellness calls to check in on our seniors to offer assistance and comfort. Our Police Activities League made weekly grocery deliveries to over 170 families during the height of the pandemic and provided over 70,000 pounds of food and essential items. We've distributed thousands of dollars in gift cards, at-home activity kits, and school supplies for families. Many families with young children needed support as parents balanced their own jobs and their kids' distance learning. Our city council provided $300,000 to help fund local child care providers, and as schools closed, we created a new learning education assistance program where we offered a safe place for distance learning. Over the summer, we created in-person outdoor summer camps with enhanced safety measures. Our libraries gave out over 2,000 books to local families and created a new curbside pickup where we safely circulated over 150,000 materials to the community. Helping people stay housed, connected, and safe, we allocated over $1 million towards rental assistance programs and essential services through Samaritan House. We also rallied around our small business community, the local restaurants, salons, retailers, and employers who support our economy. We provided $700,000 in grant funding towards the San Mateo County Strong Small Business Fund. We made calls to local businesses to help connect them to local, state, and federal resources. To support the vibrancy of downtown, we created a new parklet program and made portions of B Street open to outdoor dining. So many people have been helping to support our business community and their neighbors. Across San Mateo, we've seen signs of hope, people supporting each other and their community. It's been a year unlike any other, but we've gotten through it together. We will recover because we are San Mateo Strong. And thank you again, Samantha, for putting that video together. Okay, Due to the health orders in place at this time, we are holding meetings remotely. Information on how to provide public comment is explained at the bottom of each published agenda. When public comment is announced for the item you wish to comment on, when signed on to the Zoom, using Zoom, use the raise your hand feature and you will be called upon at the appropriate time. If you're calling in via phone, please press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, *6 to unmute yourself. These options for public comment will remain available until I close public comment for that specific item. Okay, for the first item on the agenda, we have a proclamation for Red Cross Month, and I am going to read the proclamation, and then we have a guest speaker. Okay, here we go. Whereas March is American Red Cross Month, a special time to honor the kindness of our neighbors who aid families in need every day in San Mateo, across the United States, and around the world. Whereas their dedication touches millions of lives each year as they carry out the organization's 140-year mission of preventing and alleviating suffering. And whereas during the trying times of the coronavirus pandemic, people have stepped up to help others in need, whether it was responding to the year's record-breaking disasters across the country or rolling up their sleeves to give blood when our country faced a severe blood shortage. And whereas last year, the Red Cross collected 1,075 blood donations in San Mateo County and provided first aid, CPR, and AED training to 3,997 individuals. And whereas families have relied on Red Cross volunteers for comfort and hope by addressing their urgent needs like food, lodging, and recovery support. And last year, Red Cross volunteers helped residents affected by 30 home fires in San Mateo County. And whereas in addition, Red Cross volunteers installed 285 smoke alarms to make 136 San Mateo County households safer. And whereas nearly 200 years since the birth of the American Red Cross founder, Clara Barton, we dedicate this month of March to all those who continue to advance her noble legacy, and we ask others to join in their commitment to care for people in need. Now, therefore, I, Eric Rodriguez, Mayor of San Mateo, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the laws of the City of San Mateo and the State of California, do hereby proclaim March 2021 as American Red Cross Month in the City of San Mateo, and encourage all citizens to support the mission of the American Red Cross to bring immediate assistance when our neighbors are faced with emergencies. And I would like to invite Mr. John Waddell from the American Red Cross Government Relations Committee to say a few words if you like. Go ahead, John. Are you on mute or your volume?
I think my headset was.
Oh, there you go.
All right, so much better. I want to thank the City Council of San Mateo for once again recognizing the work of the Red Cross. As you mentioned, we certainly have had a very challenging year. It is exciting to see the vaccines being distributed, but even during this pandemic, the Red Cross, as you've noted, continues to install smoke alarms, train, and also focus on blood donation. And that is something that during the pandemic is more important than ever. People have been, sometimes changing their schedule or not donating blood. So I would like to remind folks they can visit redcross.org/donate to find out where a blood drive is if they're interested in getting back into that. And again, thank you so much for all that you do to support the Red Cross in San Mateo County and the City of San Mateo.
And thank you, John, for all that you do for our community as well. All right, we're going to move on to the consent calendar. Madam Clerk, can you please read the consent calendar items 2 through 9?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered by the council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion without discussion. If discussion is desired, that item may be removed and considered separately. Item number 2, City Council meeting minutes approval. Item number 3, ordinance adoption, zoning code amendments. Item number 4, ordinance adoption, COVID-19 hazard pay for large grocery store and large drugstore. Item number 5, tenant relocation payments, appropriation of funds. Item number 6, school crossing guard services agreement. Item number 7, parking enforcement services agreement. Item number 8, interim community benefit framework for future development projects, interim process. Item number 9, San Mateo Police Department mindfulness project agreement and appropriation.
Thank you. Is there any member of the council who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, is there any member of the public who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? And I'm seeing a couple hands raised. I don't know if they're...
We have some hands raised.
Okay.
I will go ahead.
Thanks.
And the first speaker is Melissa Blum.
You're still, oh, there you go.
Hello. I would like to bring up a concern regarding leaf blowers. Do I leave that to the last 15 minutes of the meeting?
No, after we finish the consent calendar, we're going to have open public comment, and you can speak about anything you like that's not on the agenda.
Okay. Sorry, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, another hand went down. We have still a comment from Liz.
Oh, hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Oh, I was just curious. So what was what exactly is item number 8 in regards to? I was just confused on that one.
Item number 8. Do you
Sorry, I guess I should have, what was it called?
let me just pull up that part of... So
It's the interim community benefit framework for future development projects, the interim process.
Okay. Is that the one that deals with the transition housing?
You're referring to the presentation by the county in terms of the hotels?
Yes.
That is not. That is going to be a item later on. It's, I think, the last item we're going to talk about, and that is item number, I think it's 15.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
I second.
Madam Clerk, can you call roll?
Yes, Councilmember Goethals.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Bonilla.
Yes.
Councilmember Pappen.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
And Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Now is the next item is the public comment. And members of the public wishing to comment on any item not appearing on the agenda may address the City Council at this time. State law prevents the council from taking any action on any matter not on the agenda. Your comments may be referred to staff for follow-up. Public comment is limited to a total of 15 minutes. However, an opportunity for additional public comment may be provided later on in the agenda. And now would be the time to raise your hand. And Madam Clerk.
We do have some speakers, Mr. Mayor. The first speaker is Melissa Bloom.
I see you're still on mute, Melissa. Okay.
Okay. Hi, this is Chris Bloom. I wanted to highlight the problem of the leaf blowers. And I think I wanted to specify by saying, what is the problem? And that is that San Mateo needs to immediately ban combustion engine powered leaf blowers and string trimmers. These devices pose significant health hazards to both the equipment operators and San Mateo residents, including the discharge of particulate matter, carbon monoxide, unburned fuel, and ozone. They also contribute to climate change by emitting carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. They produce as much CO2 in 30 minutes as a Ford 150 Raptor truck does by driving 3,800 miles. They also generate significant noise pollution. We can't control it as San Mateo residents or get away from it. It's continuous with daily overlap of noise from multiple blowers. It's constant. They cause hearing loss. The CDC and Johns Hopkins School of Medicine both highlight that even a short amount of time is enough to damage workers' hearing. The low frequency noise they generate leads to decibel levels of 55 or greater that can be heard from a half mile away. The operators of the equipment is harmed by the 112 decibels generated by the machines at close proximity. And these low-wage workers that are forced to use this equipment are not being protected by San Mateo City and are inequitably denied the choice to protect their hearing and their lungs. Children at home and in our local schools are distracted and stressed. Zoom workers at home cannot effectively work during the daytime. San Mateo families are denied the quiet enjoyment of their homes. Families cannot use their yards due to the overwhelming noise, except on Sundays when we all realize what an infernal cacophony the other 6 days of San Mateo life we must endure because the city council's failure to act in step with all of our neighboring cities, despite considering this question as far back as 2012. Cities like Los Altos, Belmont, Atherton, Mountain View, Palo Alto, and I'm sure you're all aware of the unanimous passage of such an ordinance in Oakland in October of last year. My request is that the San Mateo City take up this question and finally and immediately act to protect its residents against these prevalent and scientifically proven harms. Thank you.
Next speaker is Pam Riddlemeyer.
Hello, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I support a ban on leaf blowers, as the gentleman before me just commented. He stated a lot of facts, and I agree, and I would support a ban in the city of San Mateo. And I believe somebody else in my household would like to say something. Introduce yourself.
My name is Naomi, and
She's in 6th grade.
And like whenever we go for a walk and someone's doing their leaf blowing, it's really annoying, and sometimes it makes you cough and it gets in your eyes and stuff. And I think that it's like bad for everybody's health.
That's it. Thank you.
The next speaker is Jeff.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I won't have as many facts as the first speaker, but I'm also wanting to discuss leaf blower bans. Just one anecdotal thing. I have tracked the last 4 public holidays of which leaf blowers are banned. I walk around and they are persistently used. I called the San Mateo non-emergency 911 to report it. Obviously, in the middle of COVID, this is not of high priority. But the reality is that these things are used so persistently, so consistently, we are ruining the peace and tranquility of a great city. And even on the days when they're banned, there can be no enforcement. And I don't blame the police officers for not rushing out to stop somebody using a leaf blower on a public holiday when they're banned. The point is that these things are so pernicious, so widely used, and they are so loud that it simply is ruining the peace and tranquility of naps, enjoying time with family. And we need to be bold and do just what Oakland did. I'm tired of this ruining a beautiful city. And I really think it is ruining the tranquility for people in the city. I'll leave it at that. But there's just the simple fact that on major holidays, it's unenforceable. There is no action, and no one takes it seriously. I don't blame the police officers. They obviously have more important things to do, but just that simple fact alone, it is an unenforceable thing. They run from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and there's no escape from them. I'll stop. Thank you.
Next speaker is Frank Thayer.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I would like to echo my previous speakers. I would also like to renew the request to ban gas-powered leaf blowers. In our particular neighborhood, we are subjected to these things starting Monday morning at 9 o'clock. It drones constantly the entire week. It drones in connection with other weed trimmers, with all other machines. It is just a pandemonium. It disrupts Zoom meetings. It disrupts kids play outside. And it just has been going on for the last 52 weeks. I know this was in front of the Sustainment Committee last year, so you do know about how far this noise travels. You know about the toxic impact and all this. In my observation, most of the landscapers in our area, they're constantly violating the ordinance. They blow on holidays, as it was mentioned. They blow after 5, they blow with full speed, and often with 2 or more of these devices on all property, all of which violates the ordinance. And since this is a low priority, there is this little to no enforcement. And we residents, as this was mentioned now multiple times, we are stuck with the noise, with the impact, week after week, month after month. I know that the Sustainment Committee deemed this not to be important enough to be added to your agenda, but I would really like you to urge to reconsider and follow Oakland's example and just ban these devices. As the previous speaker said, you're ruining a fantastic city with this constant droning. Thank you very much.
And the next speaker is Wayne Lee.
Mayor Rodriguez and member of City Council. My name is Wayne Lee, president of the San Mateo County Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, and I am speaking on their behalf tonight. As you probably know, there has been many assaults against Asians, and particularly elderly. And though we believe that all lives should be respected at this juncture, as Asians are being targeted for assaults. In that respect, the caucus is putting on a seminar with Sheriff Carlos Bolanos and District Attorney Steve Wagstaff, as well as Dr. Russell Jang, who is the director at Stop API Hate. This program will be on March 27th at 11 o'clock in the morning. People can register at www.smcapi.org. And also, we also, in following up to a letter that Councilmember Anders Fung sent to all the council members, Councilmember Fung is a council member from Millbrae. We also like to reiterate that we'd like to suggest that your city do a few things if you not have already done so. We ask you to strictly enforce, rigorously investigate the assaults against Asians. We ask you to pass an ordinance to raise the penalty for hate crimes. We ask you to keep a database of assaults against any race, religion, or sexual orientations. Particularly, we want to make sure that Asians are included in this database. We ask that you create and strengthen public and safety communication programs for the Asian community. We ask you to advocate and dedicate more resources to educate our children about broad systems of racism, xenophobia, and different types of racism. We'd like you to hire and assign a multi-Eastern language-speaking community officers. And finally, we'd like you to create a program that welcomes immigrants and non-speakers to interact with law enforcement. Though this city has been a really instrumental and a model in addressing this issue. I know many of you personally have spoken up on this issue. And I also want to point out that Councilmember Lee is on the board of directors of the API Caucus. We ask you to consider these other suggestions if you not have already done so. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you soon.
I see no other speakers.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close public comment, and we're going to move on to item number 10, a public hearing, fiscal year 2021-22 comprehensive fee schedule approval. And we have Carly Hamilton, management analyst, going to be presenting to us. Well, welcome, Carly.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Rodriguez and members of the City Council. My name is Carly Hamilton. I'm a management analyst in the finance department. And I'm just going to pull up a presentation. So just let me know if you can see that.
We can see it. It's not in presentation mode yet, though.
All right. You know when you see that. Okay. Thank you. All right, so this is the annual public hearing for the revisions to the comprehensive fee schedule. Public notice was made on February 27th and March 5th of this year. Annually, fees are increased by CPI, which was 1.1% this year in the Bay Area. And as a reminder, fees are cost recovery, not to exceed the cost of providing the service, and sewer fees are not included in this revision process. The changes I've highlighted for you tonight include new fees, fees increased in excess of CPI, and eliminated fees. New fees are usually for new services that we'd not previously charged for. Like in the case of the library tote, it had previously been by donation only. For parks and recreation, we have a new subscription for golf. And in the community development department, we have the new temporary certificate of occupancy in order to recover the costs associated with issuing this permit. Fees that have increased in excess of CPI are usually due to salary schedule increases, like in the case of the police department outside detail rates. Some facility rentals were increased in the Parks and Recreation Department in order to be more in line with comparable locations or rentals in neighboring cities. And all of those fees that you see listed with CCI were increased based off of the construction cost index for the Bay Area, which is 5.1% this year. Fees that were eliminated, we only had one this year. It was the parking enforcement rep, as this position is no longer utilized by the police department. We did not have any reductions in fees this year. And other changes I'd like to highlight include the police footnote on page 9.2, noting that outside detail rates may increase during the year due to negotiated salary schedule increases. Parks and Rec had a couple of changes where instead of a dollar amount, they switched it to the staff hourly rates. And I'd like to note that that will be step 2 of the current salary schedule. And CDD underwent a fee study with Matrix Consulting Group and brought their suggestions for revisions to council on February 16th. And the proposed fee schedule tonight reflects those changes that they brought to you. And with that, I'm happy to field any questions you may have about the fee schedule. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Do we have any questions from council at this time? I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. So I will open up public comment on this item. If you'd like to speak on it, now would be the time to raise your hand.
Mr. Mayor, I see no hands raised.
Okay, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to council for additional questions, comments, or a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the revised fee schedule.
I second.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Pappen?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Bonilla?
Yes.
Councilmember Goethel's?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you for that presentation, Carly. Don't take the lack of questions as offense. It was a great presentation.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. All right, we're moving right along to public hearing, item number 11, ordinance introduction, accessory dwelling unit and junior accessory dwelling unit updates. And we have Philip Brennan, associate planner, with us to present.
Great, thank you. Let me share my screen. Please let me know if that's in presentation mode.
Looks great.
Great. Well, good evening to Mayor Rodriguez and members of the council. I wanted to begin by just providing some brief background on the related legislation from the state with regard to ADU and JADU law and how we have arrived here today. Back in 2016 and 17, the state passed several housing bills intended to encourage more ADU and JADU construction throughout the state. There's been an immediate impact as a result of those reforms, as we've seen a marked increase in ADU applications submitted to the city from 2016 to 2019 after these laws went into effect, in contrast to years prior. That interest has continued as the number of applications have increased with the passing of the most recent round of ADU related housing bills discussed in the next slide. In January of 2020, 3 specific Assembly and Senate bills came into law, which built upon the 2016 and 17 legislation. SB 13, AB 68, AB 881 took direct aim at easing local zoning controls, reducing associated development impact fees, and expediting permit processing associated with ADU and JADU development. That March, as an initial step to developing an update to our local ordinance, staff provided City Council an update of the new legislation, detailing the corresponding impacts to local agencies and outlining the remaining areas of discretion under local control. Unfortunately, the onset of the pandemic began and the shelter-in-place order was issued by the county, which disrupted planned outreach efforts and ultimately delayed the update of our local ordinance. With that said, staff is again moving forward with an update of the local ordinance that will be comprised of 2 phases. We're currently in phase 1 with the introduction of the draft ordinance this evening. The primary purpose of this initial update is to formally integrate the changes with the state regulations into our local ordinance. We hope to have this ordinance formally adopted at the City Council's April 5th meeting. I did want to make note that the draft ordinance was presented to the Planning Commission on February 9th as part of phase 1. The commission voted 4-1 in favor to recommend to City Council adoption of the ordinance. With phase 2, there will be an extensive community outreach effort to help inform the development of a second, more comprehensive, excuse me, and nuanced update reflective of the community's input and guidance from the Planning Commission and City Council. And staff is intending to return to both the Planning Commission and City Council to present the second ordinance update before the end of this summer. The proposed ordinance is really a straightforward update intended to get our local ordinance in line with the state regulations. Some of the more noteworthy changes are listed here and have been outlined in detail in the administrative report. I did want to briefly go over a couple of the more notable changes where staff is recommending specific development standards regarding ADU building height, as well as a discussion item for the council regarding locating ADUs in required front yard areas. The state mandates that agencies allow ADUs to be at least 16 feet in height. It does not define, however, how building height is measured. Our municipal code specifies that building height is measured from existing grade to the highest plate line of the structure above. And so this allows for pitched roofs, parapets, and other architectural features to extend past the technical building height maximum, which can often create a building with more visual mass and presence. And staff feels it's prudent with this initial ordinance update to define building height for detached ADUs differently and measure from grade to the highest roof peak rather than the top of plate, and to also limit maximum ADU height, at least temporarily, to 16 feet. The intent is to reduce some of the potential privacy and view impacts of detached ADU development on adjacent properties. And while the community is providing feedback, or while staff is collecting feedback from the community on the matter during phase 2 for the purpose of informing the second ordinance update to occur later this year. This slide is intended to just help illustrate what we just discussed. Again, staff is proposing for detached ADUs to measure building height from existing or finished grade to the highest roof ridge. Let's see if I can point this out. So typically we measure building height in all other instances from existing grade to the top of the highest plate. And staff is proposing for detached ADUs that we measure from existing grade to the top of roof ridge. And this would be the how we would measure ADU building height in terms of detached units in the interim between this initial ordinance update and the update to come in phase 2. Building height for attached ADUs is much more straightforward. We would simply utilize our standard building height definition, measuring the plate line, and utilize the height limitations established by the underlying zoning district to measure attached ADUs. Staff is requesting the council discuss the matter of locating ADUs in required front yard setback areas. Every zoning district establishes required yards or building setbacks, which helps define the building envelope or developable area on a given lot. The state ordinance is silent regarding whether ADUs can be located in required front yard setbacks of a parcel, and specifies only that new ADU construction provide for a 4-foot side and rear yard setback. The Department of Housing and Community Development has interpreted the exclusion of the front yard setback standard in the state ordinance to mean that ADUs are permitted within required front yard areas without restriction. Our city attorney's office reads the provisions of the state law differently and proposes prohibiting the location of ADUs within the required front yard setbacks, and have drafted findings outlining health and safety concerns related to pedestrian safety and vehicle safety as well. And that those draft findings are available in the draft ordinance, which is attached to the administrative report. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to respond to any questions related to the development standards outlined in the administrative report or the proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Looks like we have a question from Councilmember Lee.
Great.
Hi, Philip. Do you mind coming back to the slide showing the number of applications?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have this offhand in your mind, but it was in the staff report that, and I think it's really important to make this very visible to the public in terms of, you know, the difference between the number of applications we get versus the number of permits issued versus the number of actual built units. So do you mind speaking to those differences and how our data looks and the trajectory looks in terms of what's actually getting built and permitted in the last couple of years?
Sure. I will say that I don't have the number, exact number off the top for these particular years, but what I can say is that given the fact that ADU development or entitlements are through a ministerial process, most applications that are submitted are going to be approved. It's going to be the rare exception for an ADU permit to not be permitted.
It did say in the staff report that this year 52 ADUs were issued building permits. And 35 were completed. And then only 45 ADUs were permitted in 2019 and 21 were completed. So I think it's really important to contrast the information that we're presenting to the public in terms of what's actually changing in our communities when you're presenting applications versus the completed projects. So just to reiterate, in 2019, 45 ADUs were permitted. Your graph shows 55 being applied. And then said this year, which I'm assuming is last year, 2020, only 52 ADUs of the 88 were permitted and only 35 were completed. So it's a pretty big delta. And I just want to make sure that the community, as we just have this discussion, that we're framing it in a way of in the context of this community and the volume is really understood.
Yeah, fair enough. I would say that the applications and those numbers which speak to completion, I mean, you can submit an application for an ADU, and a lot of these ADUs, or a handful of them, often take, go past the calendar year in terms of when they're actually finalized and completed. So that has to be accounted for.
If I may interject for just one moment. This is Christina Horsberger, CDD Director. I think you're going to get some more information on that in a later agenda item on our housing element annual progress report about some of the completion of the ADUs. So I think if you sit tight a little bit, you'll get a little bit more detail on that aspect in a later presentation.
Great, thank you. Is that all your questions, Councilmember Lee? I think you might be on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you, yes.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Bonilla, you're on mute too.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions, and this slide we're looking at right now. The state passed ADU laws in 2016 and 2017. There has been an increase in ADU permit applications, although from my point of view, considering the need for housing and the reason that the ADU legislation was created was to encourage construction of new accessory units for people to live in, to encourage that, right? And that then you say new legislation. So anyway, I think the fact that the state passed legislation to encourage this indicates and that it's something that's desirable. And for a long time, I've been working with the county's Home for All, where it's certainly viewed as such a great thing that they put together a whole package to help people get this done. So I have some questions here.
Sure.
Today I visited somebody who has a very small lot on Ivy Street, and they're trying to get a permit to repair and maintain and make functional their 99-year-old garage. But they can't because they're being told that, well, it's non-conforming, and the only thing you can do is replace it with a two-car garage, which they don't have room for. Basically, these people need to apply for a variance because their lot is so small. And it seems to me that if you ask people to, instead of actually building a unit on top of their garage, or maybe just build on the ground, they're going to have to build to get the square footage they need. They're going to have to cover more ground in their backyard, where many people have in San Mateo. I have one, a 4,000 square foot lot, not big enough to sprawl out an 800 or 1,200 square foot ADU. This also limits the ability to have trees. In fact, existing trees may be cut down, which has negative impacts on us. Permeability of rainwater. The more land you cover with a living unit rather than stacking it up, the less ability the water has to absorb into the ground. And many people, I think, in an eagerness to try and provide more living units, might eliminate their garages, which means where do the cars need to park? We don't have enough transit in our neighborhoods right now for everybody to be riding transit. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that people have cars. And great, so question regarding the point of the height, not at the top plate, but some new interpretation, which is called the top of the ridge. I'm really surprised. I've been in construction all my life, and I've been involved in planning in this city for 26 years. It has always been the height is determined by the top of plate. I don't think that this is something that's going to fly under health and safety. I really feel like we need to stick with the traditional. Is there? So I got to ask you, okay? Do you think the provisions that are being recommended are going to limit applications that we're going to get for construction of ADUs? Or make it difficult for people to be able to construct ADUs?
It's hard to say. Frankly, just anecdotally, we don't receive many requests for two-story ADUs or ADUs built on top of a garage. That's not to say that we've never had that request, but it's hard for me to say if it's going to be severely impacting. I think the point is with this initial draft ordinance is that we do, again, take a prudent approach, given some of, we understand based off of some of what our peer agencies along the peninsula have experienced in terms of ADU height. It's been controversial. And so staff's recommendation is that we put a cap on ADU height temporarily for the next few months, get community input on how they envision ADU's development to be in their community, and come back to the planning commission and the city council and present those findings so that you're fully informed and can provide staff guidance.
Yeah, I think this is okay. I have one more question. Are you aware that Assembly Bill 68 amended Government Code Section 65852.282, which states the ordinance shall not be considered in the application of any local ordinance, policy, or program to limit residential growth? The state intends for this to happen. I think this measure is limiting, and I think that's a violation of the intent. And also, I think in our grand jury response to the letter they sent us, we said that we had been making every effort to create awareness of both financing and construction options for the construction of secondary units. And yet, how can we do that while at the same time we're limiting the ability? I live in the Hayward Park neighborhood. Many people have units over garages in my neighborhood. So, okay, those are my questions. I'll make more comments later. Thanks.
Okay, we have other questions from council. I'm not seeing any. Please use your virtual hand so I can see. Okay, I'm not seeing any. I have a question. And apologies if you stated this when you're going through, but when was phase 2 gonna begin, or when did you plan on going back to I guess the planning commission?
Yeah, so phase 2 would begin immediately after the adoption of and actually concurrently with the adoption of this initial ordinance update in terms of developing outreach materials, surveys, scheduling virtual meetings, things of that nature with the community. So it would happen immediately after the adoption of this ordinance.
Okay, I guess I asked the wrong question. When would we be prepared to, I guess when are we expecting phase 2 to end?
July or early August. So we would anticipate coming back to the Planning Commission and City Council either with this initial study session or with the draft ordinance in July or early August.
So if we enacted your recommendations this evening, it would only be like 4 or 5 months until we would be able to fine tune it and take into account community feedback and all the other concerns that various council members may have.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, that was my questions. I'm not seeing any more questions from council. Looks like we have some people eager from the public to comment on this, so I'd like to open public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our first speaker is Rayan Matashemi.
Hi there, my name is Ryan Modashemi. I'm calling in general first to say I support the creation of ADUs and believe that building ADUs and JDUs is important to help address our housing supply and demand imbalances. And along those lines, I believe that we should be allowing the taller ADUs so that they can be built on top of garages, which is a characteristic of many of our neighborhoods. So I think that that's very important because we would be limiting the amount of ADUs that could be built and making residents choose between building ADUs on their green space versus building ADUs if they would like to keep their garages because they want to retain their parking. So I think that we shouldn't be making residents have to make that decision when they could build on top of garages in areas especially that are already zoned for multi-story homes and multifamily housing. So I think that this ADU recommendation to cap heights is actually not in line with our other zoning code information. So I would encourage staff to allow and revisit the ordinance having allowed higher height limits because we could go through this community process after having allowed these height limits and then see how exactly it would look like and still have a robust community process, having the permit process open to allow taller ADUs. So in essence, I support in general that the city is looking to encourage ADU growth, but I believe that this recommended ordinance as written, by limiting what you can build on top of garages or the height of the ADU, would actually hurt us as we try to solve overcrowding, which I think is one of the largest health problems that we have, especially in this day and age. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Lisa Diaz-Nash.
Good evening, council and staff, and thank you for bringing this up tonight. I would very much like to support the staff recommendation to adopt the state rules and as presented until an in-depth analysis can be done with the restrictions as recommended. As we all know, land use and housing was the heated topic of our most recent ballot initiative. But one area where many people agreed was on the concept of encouraging ADUs and JADUs. I believe we really need a lot more community discussion on this topic, and we have a real opportunity to build community consensus in this area. So this will be extremely helpful to the development of our general plan and a demonstration that City Council is listening to the need of our residents. So I support the staff recommendation as presented. Thank you.
Our next speaker is David Porter.
Thank you, council and staff. I'm a longtime San Mateo resident, homeowner, happily raising my family here. I've spent several years examining and understanding ADU regulations. I have a very large lot, and my wife and I are excited to build an ADU on our lot. I have a few considerations that I'd like to share, and more than I can actually discuss in the 3 minutes. If I have time, I'll tell you a little bit about my specific project at the end. But first, community outreach on ADUs is outdated. It hasn't been done since prior to the January 2020 changes. This height restriction proposal is a very important issue, deserves community outreach and feedback. Far too important to not get this right. This is not an emergency that requires immediate action today. There's plenty of time and reason to reach out to homeowners, builders, architects, et cetera, and find out what's best for our community. On the city's ADU information webpage, there's a beautiful photo of an apartment over a garage to show what can be done. Under this proposal, that will be illegal. We won't be able to do that anymore. Personally, I believe that fears of privacy are unfounded. We have regulations in place for single family residences. They've proven successful in balancing height with privacy. We have these proven standards to allow for daylight playing. The future of ADUs in San Mateo really depends on getting this correct. I see no reason why ADUs should be treated as second-class housing. They should have the same rules as single-family dwellings. We have a formula that works, and we should leverage that for ADUs. I understand an ADU may be 1 foot closer to a property line, but we can do the geometry to get that right. We certainly should not restrict this excessively. A very important point is if we do make these height restrictions, we'll find that off-street covered parking will be lost while we're adding occupancy to the existing spaces. Let me reiterate this. The amendment will effectively eliminate the option of preserving or creating off-street parking for ADUs. Virtually no parking will be created due to lot size and cost constraints. We'll have no choice but to contribute to parking congestion. Also, how am I going to charge my electric car? I need a garage space for that. It's a very efficient use of space. That's my wife and I would like to build a 2-story ADU. I see I have just a few seconds left. I have a 15,000 square foot buildable lot, 11,000 square feet where I can build an ADU. And I'm in the neighborhood right by City Hall, not San Mateo Park. Thank you.
The next speaker is Adam Lorraine.
Thank you, and good evening, council and staff. My name is Adam Lorraine. I
am a Sustainability and Infrastructure Commissioner, but I am speaking as a personal resident of San Mateo tonight. These are my opinions and my alone. I too join the number of public commenters who are questioning the need to make these particular height restrictions during phase one of this process. It clearly includes more than just what's necessary to bring us up to state regulations. And I feel like the restrictions on ADU height are a bit arbitrary and premature. Making the new state minimum the maximum height before going to the public for phase two community engagement just doesn't seem appropriate or necessary. I appreciate the comments and clarifying questions made by Councilmember Lee and Deputy Mayor Bonilla just now. I feel like some of what Councilmember Lee mentioned about the difference between applications and actual permits issued, and what Deputy Mayor Bonilla mentioned about different lot sizes and you know, the need for potentially having a variety of options brings up some interesting and useful points that I think speak to both what I've been hearing anecdotally, in that some people in the city have been wanting to build ADUs on their lots forever, but continue to encounter difficulty in the process to make it happen, and sort of the high level focus of these state laws in the first place, which is to increase housing and to make applying for and getting a permit for ADUs easier. So, you know, Mr. Brendan brings up that the subject of ADU heights has been controversial on the peninsula, and indeed it has. We've seen that Redwood City has just recently appeared to go for some of these restrictions, but then backtracked to continue this conversation. And I would ask that the city of San Mateo do the same. This seems, you know, I think the argument is that if we make these decisions now before we go to phase two community outreach, it puts this matter on hold and we can discuss it later. But Planning Commissioner John Ebneter, the one person who voted against approving this, brought up that there are other concerns. He was worried that it kind of takes height off the table for phase two, and everybody who joins the phase two community engagement process might come into it feeling that there's no longer a discussion to be had on this topic, and that the law will be that the minimum will be the maximum of height. And I think that's dangerous and not actually in the spirit of what we'd like to do. So I would ask that you take that part out, at least for now. Thank you.
Next speaker is Eric Holm.
Good evening, council members. My name is Eric Holm. I'm a longtime resident of San Mateo. I'm also a Parks and Rec Commission member, although my comments here are mine and not representative of the commission. I'm also a licensed architect. I don't practice in residential, I practice in schools, but I am keenly interested in ADUs and in the possibilities and need for infill housing in our environment and in our communities. Housing is a critical issue up and down the peninsula, and we need to do all we can to support housing. Additionally, coming out of the pandemic, the only way I made it through the pandemic was having a yard for my 3-year-old to run around. Having a requirement or limiting us to only be able to build a single-story ADU means that people are forced with choosing any yard at all or a development. I'm currently looking at building an ADU. If I was limited to a single story, I probably wouldn't build one because I could use a lot less of my yard if I built 2-story or built an ADU over a garage, which is actually what I would like to do. The additional comments I'd like to reiterate what the last speaker said about Commissioner Ebneter's comments during the Planning Commission was that if you restrict it, it's going to be a lot harder to allow the height later. The current staff practice is to allow buildings up to the ridge line or the plate line, as Deputy Mayor Bonilla mentioned. And I think that arbitrarily restricting it now to then potentially loosen it once you've had community updates is the wrong way. You're kind of going at it backwards. And in the commission meeting, both commissioners and staff indicated that this restriction was to limit development during the Planning Commission meeting. And that's really the wrong way we should be going about this. One other thing that hasn't been mentioned was a small item in the ordinance about restricting ADUs to be constructed of similar materials finishes, family of colors, and architectural style. And I also take issue with that. There was a recent San Mateo Journal article about the great changes in the law and ADUs that are coming to San Mateo, and it focused on a prefab ADU that was installed in San Mateo. It was a very modern ADU. Mayor Rodriguez was quoted in the article expressing the virtues of ADUs. That would be virtually non-allowed anymore in the city by that other provision to match the architectural style of your primary structure. Many of our houses are bungalows, mission style, Spanish style, little ranch houses, and most of prefab housing, ADUs, there's several companies all over the Bay Area that have popped up to help support easy ADU development. A lot of those are modern designs. And I think that both the height provision and the aesthetic provision are onerous and will lead to less people developing ADUs. Thank you.
The next speaker is Kuehler.
Oh, sure. Hello. So I also live in the Hayward Park neighborhood, like Deputy Mayor Bonilla, and I can confirm the prevalence of the above garage units. I do not support the staff ordinance as shown. I think these height restrictions that I've seen coming from San Mateo as a resident come across as reactionary more than balanced. I live in a 3-story development in a sea of mostly single-story houses, and it is not imposing at all. The traffic gridlock never really happened, and it's not even visible a couple of blocks away. The current state of the peninsula, as I have seen, partially experienced, or known people who have experienced this, like in many California single-family home neighborhoods, is one of overcrowding. And ADUs have become more of a topic because they're a very subtle but very helpful method to relieve this overcrowding. And I think we should be embracing that rather than looking to halt that. And as others have pointed out, the state is moving towards putting less restrictions on ADUs, not more, likely for the same reasons. So I think that we should be working towards that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jonathan New.
Hi, this is Jonathan New, and I'm a homeowner here in San Mateo. I basically agree with the sentiment of several of the earlier speakers. I'm strongly in favor of the creation of ADUs as the property owner sees fit. We need to support several different kinds of infill housing options to help ameliorate our housing supply shortage. I don't really see the purpose that these height and aesthetic restrictions are supposed to fill. I think the privacy concerns are largely unfounded. I live next to a 3-story apartment, and it's completely fine. We should really allow ADU creation on the top of garages to maximize the flexibility of the space. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Seema Patel.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I am a community relations commissioner, but I am speaking today as a private citizen and resident of San Mateo. I wanted to echo the comments that other people have made and note that when my husband and I bought our home 2 years ago, we intentionally looked for a single family home on a lot that was zoned multifamily so that we could do our part to help address the housing crisis by building additional units. Our intent has always been to build on top of our 2-story garage, which would actually bring us in line with the rest of our block. Every other house on our block is 2-story with the exception of one, and almost all of them have a second unit on top of a garage. Our neighbor to our immediate right has a second unit on top of our garage, and the property to our left is a multi-story condo development. And so I was quite surprised to hear that not many permits have been received for 2-story ADUs just because, again, of the prevalence of them in my neighborhood. I don't know if my neighbors have all built many decades ago, but it does seem to be quite common in my neighborhood at least. So I'm concerned that if we limit the height now through the phase 2 public comment period, that we might get a slowdown in permit applications, because that's certainly what my husband and I would do. We would stop and wait to see what happens. If we're forced to choose between losing our garage or losing the small scrap of yard we have, we'll probably give up our garage. And I think that might contribute to some of the parking concerns that people have expressed. So I would encourage not to restrict the heights at this time, just so we don't slow down the permit applications. And if in the future there is a need to restrict ADU development anyway, I would try to bias it on the side of encouraging more growth. You know, maybe there's a way to say, if you have an immediate neighbor that has a 2-story unit, you're automatically allowed to build 2-story, or maybe if a certain percentage of your block is 2 stories, you're automatically allowed to build 2-story. I also wanted to note that some of our neighboring cities have higher height limits. San Carlos is 20 feet above a detached garage. Belmont is up to 28 feet above a garage. And I believe that Redwood City just went up to 22 feet above a detached garage. So limiting the height at this point would have us be quite more restrictive than our neighboring cities while we have a higher RHNA number to accommodate. That's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, and our last speaker is Martin Wiggins.
Good evening.
We are having trouble hearing you, Martin. I think you're
Oh,
muted.
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. I don't have as eloquent or as thoughtful or as well researched comments as some of the people prior, but I really just wanted to call in and voice just one more voice of support as a homeowner in North Central that lives in a 3-story condo. It's a struggle to imagine that a 2nd story on top of a garage could really be so problematic to any neighborhood in San Mateo. I'm pretty sure I've seen 2 stories pretty much everywhere around town. So just quickly supporting more, this extra height, which is really not a very great height at all, to allow us to get more homes here in San Mateo. Thank you very much.
Okay, and last speaker is Heather Hopkins.
Hi, good evening. My name is Heather Hopkins. I'm an organizer with Community Equity Collaborative. We do projects in San Mateo County that advance educational equity. I first wanted to thank the council for your support of preserving and increasing access to early childhood education and childcare with your recent allocation of CDBG funds to the Child Care Relief Fund, but also your foresight in creating the development fee that brought about the Child Care Facilities Fund. As you likely know, the city of San Mateo and San Mateo County in general is experiencing a growing shortage of childcare and early education. And this really is due to the inability of childcare professionals and early educators to afford housing. Because of this, I've also become a housing advocate and just wanted to quickly call in to say that I would love to see San Mateo move forward to make ADUs more available, including supporting the extra height limits. Thank you so much.
And our next speaker is Jordan Grimes.
Good evening, Council, Honorable Mayor. Jordan Grimes, 19th Avenue Park. So I was a little disappointed to see staff recommended the adoption of the state's minimum height limits for ADUs of 16 feet. Like others, I really do hope Council will reconsider. As discussed, 16 feet are essentially, they're a minimum set by the state, not a maximum. And a 16-foot maximum effectively prohibits ADUs above garages. But more importantly, adopting this ordinance as is would likely be a huge waste of staff time. AB 916, currently before the legislature, would adjust the state's minimum height limits for ADUs to 20 feet. The legislature has made it abundantly clear over the past several years that increasing ADU production, and in fact, making them as easy to build as possible is a top priority. So should council adopt this ordinance as written, staff will almost assuredly have to spend further time modifying it later next year. Instead, I would encourage council to adopt a limit of 22 to 26 feet from bottom to plate in order to give us a buffer and not have to revisit this topic once more. And then just lastly, we don't need consensus on ADUs. We need action. ADUs are the gentlest form of density there is, and it's antithetical to our city's values to prioritize the concerns and input of the comfortably housed over the building of badly needed housing stock. Thanks.
And our next speaker is Michael Nash.
Good evening, everyone. I assume you can hear me. I found this conversation on ADUs to be very interesting. The diversity of opinion is obvious. There's not even any consensus on what any additional height should be, other than complaints about the 16 feet being too much of a limit. We're discussing a 4-month period to do an evaluation and discussion with a broad cross-section of people in the city. And I think that is only a proper thing to do. And that would include the ability to come up with alternate heights rather than restrict or inhibit people because the 16-foot height is there temporarily. I think the main action is get people involved, find out what they want, figure out the way to get it done, and then make the ordinance work and not preempt that by trying to ram something through before it's properly evaluated. So let's do the right thing and do the study. Thank you very much.
I have no other speakers.
Great, thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to council for additional questions or some comments. Do we have any council members like to start us off? All right. Oh, Councilmember Lee.
Yes, I am really concerned to change the way that we're proposing that we measure height. Effectively, this reduces the allowable height. And I believe that this actually overreaches beyond the intent of what we are trying to do, which is bring our codes into compliance with the state requirements. So, so the notion that, you know, we are here to streamline our codes, make sure that we are in compliance. I fully support. I, of course, along with the entire council, fully support a robust community outreach process. To me, it's very problematic that we're proposing a change that effectively reduces height, and then the potential of just a couple of feet reduction actually does significantly hinder and in many cases completely disallows the result of building necessary housing and ADUs on top of garages. The proposal to build on top of garages for me is really central to our strategy of addressing the housing crisis. And it meets so many needs and priorities that the city has and the community has echoed very loudly, which is we want to preserve parking, we want to preserve green space, we want to preserve the character of our neighborhoods and the integrity of our neighborhood from a design perspective. All of those things are actually very consistent with the opportunity to build ADUs on top of garages, which is in fact a common practice throughout the entire city and is already part of the city's aesthetic landscape. So, the proposal to change the way that we measure ADUs effectively disallows that, and I find that incredibly problematic. What I would like to see is consistency, which would mean a cap of 16 feet, which is the state minimum, applied from top plate to bottom plate, which would allow an ADU to be built on top of a garage. The measuring starts where the residence begins on top of the garage, and provide and apply a maximum of 24 feet to the ridge in all zoning districts. We know that the intent of ADUs is to design them in a way that make them subordinate to the main structures. There are many ways that we can do that. Naturally, that happens when there are setbacks, when they're at the back of the lot, they are mandated to be smaller. And I think that on top of a garage is completely appropriate. I'm very concerned with this one suggestion, and I would like it to be amended. I also want to underscore the point that we know there are likely to be changes to ADU requirements from the state. AB 916 is coming down the pipeline. That is proposing an increased minimum height from 16 to 20 feet. I think that if we're taking a prudent approach, if we're advocating for prudence to me means consistency across all of our codes. It also means community outreach, and it also means keeping a very keen eye towards what's coming down from the state. So I strongly, to the strongest words available to me, I would love to see us take a strategic approach here in support of consistency across all of our codes and the measurement from top plate to bottom plate, and make sure that whatever proposal we're allowing, it is not preventing two-story ADUs on top of garages.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. I saw Deputy Mayor Bonilla's hand up first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not going to reiterate some statements that I made earlier, but I just want to remind that the reference in building, and I did look at what the state recommended, and they did not mention anything with their 16-foot height about top of roof ridge. The implication is top of plate, which is always used. So though they didn't explicitly make that clear, they did not say anything about top of roof ridge. So I want to respond to mentions of privacy issues. You know, we got a letter from former council member Jack Matthews, who also is an architect, commenting that, well, first I want everybody to know we have two-story houses all over the place, and they all look into each other's backyards. It's not unusual. It's accepted practice. I mean, it's not considered a privacy issue, but these issues can be addressed through a design review committee, right? Which would be able to look at these and suggest, as we did with the rear windows, I think, on the Waters Park project. There are clear story windows which are up high. Other windows are looking to the side rather than over to the existing homes' yards. There are ways to deal with these privacy issues, and they're not new. They exist. On March 8th, the Redwood City Council had a similar hearing to what we're having now. And after hearing everything, they voted unanimously to approve 22-foot heights for units of 2 stories over garages as needed. So I want to ask, there's a question I have here for, is our city attorney present? Sean, are you here? Do we have the city attorney?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thanks. Sean, I want to ask regarding this proposed height reduction from what we have. Would this height reduction violate provisions of SB 330 related to downzoning? What are your thoughts on that?
I would not be concerned that would be the case. Again, the statute does allow for, the ADU statute does allow for height limits at 16 feet, right? So I would not, I think that what staff is recommending is permissible under the language of the statute. It's up to the council to decide whether, as a matter of policy, they want to go higher.
Okay, thank you for that. So I just want to reiterate, I think reduction of height is uncalled for at this time. The state law is designed to encourage us to build. This measure makes it harder to build. I think every single council member here has mentioned at one time or another, for me several times, that we need more ADUs to get people to spread ADUs out over more of their backyard. And by the way, I'm going to mention front yards too. But over more of their backyard eliminates, like I said, space for water to soak into the earth. It causes the removal of trees and other shrubs and greenery that help remove carbon dioxide from our atmosphere. And it's just wrong-headed in terms of what's being done to encourage construction of ADUs and allow more living space within our cities. Certainly not the state's intent that we should be reducing heights in an effort to make it difficult to build units, which seems to be the intent from what I can see looking at this and what I think other people have stated they felt they were seeing. I would agree that with a 22-foot, similar to Redwood City, 22-foot height to allow building over garages. Some garages are of different heights. So I appreciate what Councilwoman Lee said, which would be that you allow an 8-foot living space above the garage construction. If it comes down to that, if some others would prefer that, I would also be amenable to that. But I will not vote in favor of reducing height limits. Thank you. On this.
Sorry, Councilmember Goethals, I saw your hand up next.
So I had a couple of thoughts. My two main thoughts are that we're at the beginning of this conversation, and at this point we should not be restricting either the aesthetics or the height any more than we already do restrict height within residential neighborhoods. But I do agree that this is a conversation that's going to continue. Michael Nash brought up the point that we're in the process of doing more outreach. There's more legislation at the state level that will be coming, but I reached the opposite conclusion about how we should be approaching that right now. Rather than restricting those things, I think we should be keeping an open mind and really having a discussion that includes all different opinions about height and aesthetics. I think that we should be supporting the second story ADUs, the ones above the garages. I think supporting those really retains open space, which is nice. There was a good point brought up by one of our commissioners about prefab and should we be supporting prefab? I think prefab is a really economical way to support ADUs, and if the style is not exactly the same, that shouldn't be a limiting factor. I think a lot of the ADUs that are prefab look really nice, so we should be supporting these, enabling these, which is the purpose of the state legislation, I think. We have not seen a lot of them. I think the point is well made to bring up the fact that we're talking about tens of units here across the entire city. Last year, we approved thousands of new housing units in apartment buildings. We're only talking about, 50 ADU units. So this is a conversation that we will continue. But at this point in the conversation, we shouldn't be limiting what's allowed. I'd like to see additional ADUs for those people who want to build them. I think it's a homeowner's right to sort of add this housing on their property. Those are my thoughts.
Councilmember Patton.
So yeah, I concur that we're all looking to ADUs to help with our housing shortage. What I'm a little bit uncomfortable with is when we met a year ago, all 5 of us voted to allow further public discourse to decide how far to go up beyond what the state allows. And so I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable because we represented to our residents that we would allow that discussion to happen. And now what I'm hearing is you got to allow higher no matter what you do. And that wasn't what we told the public we would do. So I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable. And I don't know what to do about it, because when we make a representation, we should probably stand by that. And we told people we would get their outreach. The pandemic happened and we didn't quite get all the outreach that we thought we were going to get. So I don't know what to do about it. I too think that above garages might be a great way to add housing and not get rid of the parking. Like, I get it, but we told the public, if we're going to do this and we're going to go higher than what the state is giving by right, we're going to have public discussion about it. And so I'm uncomfortable with acting right now. I actually went back and looked at our tape from March 2nd when we did this a year ago. And it was number 3, and we all said, yep, public outreach. And here we are tonight going, yeah, we're going to make a decision, or some of us want to make a decision. I don't know if I can do that. So that's where I'm coming from on it. I understand Deputy Mayor Bonilla and Councilmember Lee's issues with the 16-foot and how you measure that. So I may entertain that part of it because your representation is that it may be restricting really what you can do, and it is something different than what the state is prescribing. So I thank you for bringing that up, and I get that part of it. But I'm just a little bit uncomfortable when we have representations to our residents. They're not all here tonight. I appreciate the turnout. I know we all want to do this, but I think we should get some more public input if we're going to, like we promised to do, so that we get it done right. Did Redwood City have, public outreach before they decided 22 feet? I don't know. I wasn't a part of that, but that's where I want to go with it. I want to make sure that we have enough input. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from at this point. I do see some of it beyond what the state is prescribing is requiring some additional input, just like we decided last March. I may have more, but that's it for me for now.
Thank you. So I really appreciate the 2-phase approach proposed by staff and the majority of our planning commission. I really think that what we're talking about here, even though it may be only 1 or 2 applications over the next couple months, I think this process should not be rushed. And as Councilmember Pappen said, we need to keep our commitment to our community, and because we always said feedback is essential, community engagement is essential. Getting that feedback before we make significant decisions is important. Nobody could help the fact that COVID happened. If COVID didn't happen, then we would have already gotten the public feedback and we would be able to be in the position to make these decisions right now. But before we just change ordinances without community input, I think we need to take a more conservative approach. We've heard a lot of great ideas from the public during this public comment session. I think we would have heard a lot more if most of the public knew kind of where the direction of this conversation was heading. But I think that I'm coming into this with an open mind. I think that a lot of the ideas make a lot of sense to me. I just don't think we should be making that decision right now. I think as far as how we measure height, I think staff's recommendation makes a lot of sense. But if that's kind of the snag here, I'm okay with leaving it at the plate, not the top of the building. But I definitely think it's easier to start with a more conservative approach like what we currently have on the books and then raise it than it would be to send the message, well, it's higher now and you better get your application in because the public is actually going to have a discussion about it and who knows what we might decide then. As far as future state legislation, if that happens, they're discussing a lot of different things. We would change it. I don't think it would be particularly more work because we have the ordinance right now. Regarding a comment by Deputy Mayor Bonilla talking about Redwood City, or a comment that Deputy Mayor Bonilla brought up, referencing Redwood City situation. Yes, they came to the conclusion they did, but they had a very long and robust community discussion on that. And then they made the decision. And that is all I would like to see happen here, no matter how it goes. I think that's a commitment we've made to the public, and we should not let the fact that COVID happened change our course. That's my thoughts on that. Okay, Deputy Mayor Bonilla, I saw your hand up.
Thank you. Just a couple of final comments. Yes, Redwood City did have quite a lengthy process and they came to that conclusion. We haven't had all of that process. I do have a question. What is the allowable height limit for ADUs right now?
You're on mute, Philip.
The maximum building height for an ADU is governed by the underlying zoning district.
So if where I live, the maximum height's 35 feet, then that's what it is.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I just want to say that regarding something that was not discussed, but it was included in the report, which was the idea that it was mentioned in Philip's report, I think, that there is no reference in the state's guidelines to front yard setbacks. Where I live in the Hayward Park neighborhood, again, I mentioned my neighborhood because it's full of great examples. You can walk down any alley here and see a second-story ADU on the garage on the alley, okay? But we also have duplexes and other buildings that have been altered. We have duplexes with 8-foot driveways. So people park in their driveway and their car crosses the sidewalk and hangs out actually over the gutter if they park in their driveway. And it's not unique. There are a bunch of places like that. One place where somebody built the front of their house, I guess it was a garage at one point maybe, but now it's only 5 feet from the sidewalk because it was a garage and now it's a living unit. And it was done a long time ago, I'm sure. But the idea though is that if somebody wants to build a JADU, but they need more room on their lot and they're not willing to give up their entire backyard or they have something else built back there, they could extend the front of their house to some point where it's maybe better than if you have a hedge that's 10 feet tall and goes all the way out to the sidewalk and you can't see around it at all. But if you were to hold, let's say you're building 4 feet back, which we could certainly describe in whatever ordinance we were to shape at some point, that would allow a line of sight for people. And this is actually no different than driving out of any blind driveway, which there are plenty of. If you ever park in a garage downtown, you'll see that they ask you to honk your horn when you're coming out sometimes, or they have mirrors up there so you can see when you're coming out. We have blind driveways here in San Mateo already. So it's only as dangerous as drivers are. And we know there are plenty of them and we can't do much about them. That's just an ongoing issue. People need to know they have to be safe all the time. So anyway, those are my last comments. And I'd like to make a motion to deny the ordinance.
I'm not hearing a second, but I just have a clarification. What are our options this evening? I know that staff has made a recommendation. If we have to, it's the city attorney's recommendation that we do something about bringing our codes back or in line with the state's guidelines. What can somebody comment on, like what exactly our various options are?
Well, I think if the council is uncomfortable about provisions, aspects of the ordinance, and I've heard several senses of discomfort on different facets of the ordinance. If the council gave direction on how to modify the ordinance, my recommendation would be, rather than doing that from the dais tonight, get that direction, allow staff time to make those modifications to the ordinance, and then we could bring it back to you for introduction at the April 5th meeting, rather than introduction tonight and then adoption later. That only delays the process by one meeting of getting that interim level of conformance with the state law. So that would be my recommendation. Alternatively, if the only level of discomfort is the 16-foot, measuring the 16 foot at the top of the ridge rather than the plate line, like we do it everywhere else, that's a change that can be made tonight very, very easily by just amending that provision of the ordinance to say that it will be 16 feet, measured in the way that height is measured in the zoning code, and that would be another option, is making that very focused change and then adopting everything else. But I'm not sure that I heard support for adopting everything else.
Okay.
Could I make a suggestion, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
I'd make a recommendation that we adopt a 20-foot height limit, no more than 20 feet from the bottom of the bottom plate on the first floor to the top of the top plate on the second floor.
Do we have any comment on that? I'm personally not in favor of that. Do we have?
Deputy Mayor Bonilla, when you say bottom plate, what do you mean by that? The finished grade?
Because grade can vary on a garage. We have hills in San Mateo. We have various things that may happen. So I guess what I'm saying, I can simplify it. 20 feet from grade to top of top plate.
Can I ask a question through the mayor?
Yes, please.
Okay. Philip, can I just confirm again? I wanted to make sure that we are all on the same page here. At this point, the maximum height of an ADU and all of the ADUs that have been permitted thus far have been subject to the underlying zoning code height, which is around 30 something feet for single family homes. Is that, did I understand you correctly?
Right. So typically, I mean, your standard R1 zoning district height is going to be 24, maximum height is going to be 24 feet to plate, and then 32 feet overall.
Okay. So, so I think that's very helpful clarification. And can you also help clarify if we were to standardize the way that we measure the top plate to bottom plate, that would allow for ADUs to be built on top of garages.
Your suggestion was 16 feet,
16 feet
to plate,
top bottom
and then
plate.
24 feet maximum overall.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be able to accommodate a second floor over a garage.
Okay, so the proposal to keep our code consistent, right, in terms of how we measure the top plate to bottom plate within 16 feet, which is within the state requirement, and also limit it to 24 feet, which is below the underlying zoning code in our R1s, right? That in fact does allow for ADUs to be built over garages and is compliant with the state code and is also consistent with our code. Am I getting this all right?
Correct on all accounts.
Okay, so
But before you make a motion, could I just ask a clarifying question on what your question, Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
When we're saying what is the prevailing height of kind of these of a single family home, and then we're translating that maximum height to an ADU, but I'm not an expert in this by any means, but it can't like an ADU be like only 4 feet setback from the back and or something like that, but the home cannot be that far back. So I guess I'm wondering when we're talking about the maximum heights of an ADU, which has a different rules of where that could be placed from the actual main building, are we comparing apples to oranges, or is it a fair comparison?
Yeah, so a city cannot require an ADU to be set back further than 4 feet from the side or the rear property line. Now, a homeowner can ask to be set back 8 feet if they like, but we can't require it.
So when we're saying what the maximum height allowable from a house or from the main structure, but then we're switching that to say, oh, well, that should be what more or less what the ADU should be as well. That just seems to me like apples and oranges switch right there. That's
well, I think, and I think what Councilmember Lee is suggesting is a height maximum for detached ADUs, which is lesser than what we would require typically for a primary structure in like an R1 zoning district, where it's 24 feet to plate, 32 feet overall. I think Councilmember Lee is suggesting 16 feet to plate, 24 feet overall.
okay. And my last question is it possible, instead of taking 4 months to do the community outreach, is it possible to do it in 2 months? My thinking is something's better than nothing.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I'll let our community director weigh in on that.
I would just note that the outreach itself probably could be done within 2 months' time, but we also need the time to process the information and draft the ordinance and go through the public noticing and hearing processes. So we could accelerate it a little bit, but 2 months I think would not be something that we could do.
Okay, thank you.
I think 3 or 4 months more reasonable.
Do you have any more questions or comments? Or
I also just wanted to wrap up to reiterate that that I've heard every single council member make a clear and explicit commitment to a community outreach process and support the phased approach that the staff is recommending. And if we're trying to accomplish getting our codes into compliance, then I think it makes sense to act tonight to approve the proposed phasing and approach and the resolution with the amendment of measuring the top plate to the bottom plate at 16 feet with a maximum height of 24 to ridge. So that way we can keep moving through, bring ourselves into compliance, have a standard approach to the way that we measure, and that effectively we won't be significantly reducing the possibility of building ADUs in this very small window of months in the interim of when we get our community input and distill it, and this comes back to council. So I'd like to make that motion.
Can I ask you to repeat a little bit of that, because I'm not sure I got it all.
Sure.
It was 8 feet to the plate, and then what did you say after that?
It's 16 feet.
That won't allow floor space.
I meant 16 feet. Sorry. Say it one more time.
So, based on what Philip has said, keeping our standard measurement from top plate to bottom plate at 16 feet, with a maximum height to ridge at 24 feet, it will allow for 2-story ADUs, and it will also support the design aesthetic that makes ADUs a subordinate structure to the main structure in its size, in its height, and also its placement on the property.
I'm comfortable with that. I would second that as a limitation while we continue our outreach to the public and continue this conversation.
Mr. Mayor, I have some comments.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I need to raise the fact that existing garages have different heights. And so you need to work with the existing height of the garage and then be able to build an 8-foot living space above floor framing, which is in between the top of the garage plate and the bottom plate of the new unit above. It would not be good to say 16 feet would be it. Also, that would completely preclude two-story ADUs. If somebody wants to build a two-story ADU, I think that, it's allowed right now, right, under the existing height limits. Okay, so if we were to modify or to do anything, we could say we support public outreach to make further determinations later, but we should leave the height as it is, which is the existing height for the neighborhood. And I think that's probably makes more sense. What you proposed, Emma, would not make a second story above a garage or second story, a two-story building for an ADU possible, which requires then covering more yard space, cutting down trees, diminishing water flow into the earth, all the other things that happen as a reduction of, open earth, which we need. We need trees, we need greenery, and we don't need people covering up all of the land in their, on their property. So we're supposed to be trying to make it easier to build what people need.
That's definitely the intent. Philip, can you speak to and help us clarify this height question?
Yeah, you certainly could build a two-story ADU with a 16-foot plate height. You have a pitched roof that can extend up to 24 feet. You also have the options of placing dormers, which create floor area. There's all sorts of options. You could have a shed-style roof on a second story. There's all sorts of options to be able to build. 16 feet is very tall, even for a single-story home. To roof ridge, you can certainly build a two-story home with the restrictions, the height restrictions that Councilmember Lee outlined.
Councilmember Peppin, you have a question?
I mean, it is too, Rick, to your point, it may be when you build a garage on top of a garage, though, you may lower the roof garage, because you're gonna have to reinforce, because I know construction, not like you do, but you'd have to reinforce, obviously, the foundation, and you probably could lower the ceiling of the garage to then maybe give you the additional living space above. So in any event, I just throw that out there for whatever it's worth.
So I think what Councilmember Lee stated was a motion, and I want to second that motion. And I understand what Rick's saying, but for now, I'm comfortable with the limitations in Councilmember Lee's motion. So I would go forward with the recommendation with the numbers that Councilmember Lee stated. But I'm also mindful we have other items on our agenda, and I want to make sure that we get to them before it's Mike Callaghan and Carol Groom's bedtime. So,
okay, we have a motion. It's been seconded. Madam Clerk, can you call roll, please?
And I'm sorry if I could intervene just before, just for purposes of clarity of the record. So this is a motion to introduce the ordinance as written, with the modification that with respect to the height for detached ADUs, it's not 16 feet measured to the ridge line. It is 16 feet above grade, measured from the grade to that 16 foot for the plate line, and then above as high as 24 feet above that point.
For the ridge, which I guess is currently how we have our law anyway, correct?
No, the plate line.
16 feet the plate line, and then an additional, you can go to 24 feet above that. That was the motion.
Above that to get
to the ridge.
Above that to the ridge.
To the ridge.
Right.
Okay. Why are we dictating ridge? It's never been dictated before, really. I just, it will accept the overall building height. Okay.
Madam
Okay.
Cook. I mean,
That
Madam
clarification, Councilmember Lee.
Aye.
Councilmember Goethals?
yes.
Councilmember Pappen?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Bonilla?
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1, sorry.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to the next topic, which is old business, COVID-19 update. And we have our fearless city manager, Drew Corbett, presenting to us.
All right, thank you, Mayor Rodriguez, members of council, Drew Corbett, city manager. I've got a brief COVID-19 update tonight. So I'm gonna jump right in with the health orders. The county is on track to move to the orange tier. If our metrics hold, we could move to that tier as soon as Wednesday of this week. If that happens, we'll be able to open up some additional capacity. Gyms will be able to open up indoors up to 25% capacity. Restaurants can open indoors up to 50% capacity. Wineries and breweries can open up indoors at 25% capacities. And bars that are not serving food can open outdoors. I want to shift into the American Rescue Plan, which was signed by President Biden on March the 11th. It's going to provide significant relief to the state of California. So I want to go through that before talking about specifically the relief to San Mateo. But there's going to be about $40 billion allocated to the state, the cities, and the counties in California. There's going to be $20 billion allocated for education. 15 of that will go to K-12 schools for safe reopenings, and about $5 billion will go to colleges and universities, with about half of that amount going to emergency financial aid for students. For housing and homelessness, $2.2 billion will be allocated for emergency rental assistance. $1.2 billion will go to homeowner assistance, and about $590 million will go for homelessness assistance funding. And again, this is all within the state of California. Childcare causes will receive $3.8 billion. There'll be $4.6 billion going for access to safe, reliable transit services. Nearly $900 million will go to our airports. And then in terms of at the federal level, tax credits, the child tax credit will be expanded from $2,000 to $3,000. And that goes up to $3,600 for children under 6. And it's also going to improve the earned income tax credit for about 1.85 million California workers who don't have children. So with respect to the city of San Mateo, we are set to receive $18.64 million. We expect that half of that amount will be received by the city within 60 days, and then the other half sometime within the next fiscal year. There's 4 main allowable uses of those funds. Number one is any funds spent in response to the public health emergency, and that includes any assistance to the public or small businesses, nonprofits, or impacted industries. Funds can also be used for premium pay for essential workers. Funds can also be used, this third item is kind of a mouthful. It's for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to the pandemic. So we are seeking some clarification on the specifics of this particular use of funds. We believe what it means is that we can make up for lost revenues. And that would be helpful given that our hotel tax and our sales tax has really taken a hit due to the pandemic. But again, we are seeking clarification on the specifics of this particular provision of how the funds can be used. And then finally, funds can be used for investment in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. The legislation does explicitly state that funds cannot be used to make payments to the pension fund, so we could not make payments to CalPERS with any of these funds. There will be reporting requirements and detailed accounting on the use of the funds, and those funds must be spent by the end of 2024. As far as next steps go, again, we're going to seek clarification on some of the specifics of how the funds can be spent. And then we are going to incorporate these funds into our 10-year financial plan and then return to council in April for utilization considerations. We'd like to do it within the context of the 21-22 budget, which we will bring for a preview to council at the second meeting in April. And then briefly, just operationally, I want to spend a minute talking about the library's reopening plans. So later this month, in about 2 weeks, the plan is to open up the lobby at the main and the branch library to customers. Obviously, that'll be with limited capacity, but we're not going to be taking appointments. We'll just let people come, first served. Also on the 29th of March, we're going to allow appointments for computer usage for up to 1 hour. If things go well, 5 weeks later on May the 3rd, we plan to open up the full facilities at limited capacity. And we're anticipating right now that that capacity would be at about 25%. This is obviously subject to change based on conditions, but we are hoping to be able to get the library open soon for our residents. And in terms of council confirmation for actions taken in response to the emergency proclamation, there are none at this time. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Drew. Do we have any questions from council? Deputy Mayor Bonilla, your hand's been up for a while. If you need to say something. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'll put the hand down. Thanks.
Do we have any other questions from council? Okay, I'd like to open up public comment.
Mr. Mayor, I have no hands raised.
Okay, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to City Council for questions more or comments. I'm not seeing any hands up, and no actions required. Well, thank you very much, Drew, for all the work that you continue to do a year on out, and your team. So your work and your team's work is very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay. Old business, item number 13, markers for places of interest in the public right-of-way resolution and ordinance introduction. And we have Samantha Weigel, communications manager, going to be presenting on this one.
Guys, bear with me for just a second. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can, but we also see your notes.
Okay, thanks. Hold on one second. Okay, how about now?
Looks good, but for me, some reason it's kind of weird on the screen. I don't know if it's like that for other people.
It's missing both sides.
It's kind of like a square instead of a rectangle.
How about now?
It's better. I don't know if it's going to be missing text, but you can try to go with this.
It's missing text on the right-hand side, and the logo on the left is missing 75% of it.
Sorry about that. Let me try one more time.
Perfect.
There we go.
Okay, thanks for bearing with me. So good evening, Mayor Rodriguez and members of the City Council. I'm Samantha Weigel, the city's communications manager, and I have a short presentation for you tonight and a proposed policy on markers for places of public interest. So a little bit of background, tonight is a continuation from last year when we discussed a somewhat similar policy and a specific proposal from the nonprofit San Mateo Parks Foundation. And following council's direction, staff is working with the foundation to proceed with accepting a marker commemorating the former Chingley Laundry at the corner of First and Claremont in the location and format as proposed by the foundation. And as that proceeds, staff recommends that the council reconsider a policy regarding these types of markers in the public right-of-way. And the city attorney's office notes that there are First Amendment considerations when dealing with the public right-of-way, and this proposed policy would help address those considerations. And then we've included, as part of your packet, a resolution with the proposed policy and an ordinance to make some minor municipal code amendments. So this policy, I want to just reiterate, would really only apply to the public right-of-way, which is streets and sidewalks, which are considered traditional public forums. And when talking about traditional public forums, there's very strict First Amendment and free speech considerations. So essentially, we cannot discriminate by subjectively saying yes or no to certain markers without objective criteria. However, government speech is not subject to the same strict scrutiny standard. And government speech is when the governing body, so in this case, the City Council, is providing information or posting a message. And this proposed policy would help by establishing objective criteria to review these types of proposed markers. And would also clearly indicate that such markers are government speech and require City Council approval. Again, currently we don't have a policy or approval process in place. So this proposes, again, only covering the public right-of-way. This wouldn't affect anything in parks, on private property, on buildings, and it does not affect art installations. And it does allow the city council to decide what to commemorate. And it includes objective selection criteria, which are listed here. It also allows, though, the council to be flexible with the design or the format of markers and make decisions based on each proposal. And then as part of the proposed policy, these markers would become property and the responsibility of the city. And finally, staff has also drafted some proposed municipal code amendments for the chapter concerning placing objects in the public right-of-way. The proposed amendments are general cleanup and include allowing for markers for places of public interest, referencing the public works director instead of superintendent of streets or city engineer, and including provisions to allow restaurant seating areas as adopted by city council. And then for this last point, I just want to emphasize that any future decisions about outdoor dining will be considered by the city council at a later date. And we included this tonight just to help streamline the code amendment process. So with that, these are the recommendations that I have, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Samantha. Do we have any questions from council members? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. How about from the public? I'd like to open public comment.
Mr. Mayor, I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, I'm gonna close public comment, bring it back to council. Do we have questions and or comments? And it looks like Councilmember Pappen has a comment or a question.
Oh no, I'm actually ready to make a motion, Mr. Mayor. I think that the ordinance as proposed is almost like, you know, constitution, if you will, and allows us to fill in the blanks later as things come up. So I'm pleased with the structure of it, and I'm ready to make a motion. So I'll move that we adopt it.
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Madam Clerk, can you please call roll?
Yes.
Thank you, Councilmember Pappen. Councilmember Goethals.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Bonilla.
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
And just for clarity, for the record, that motion was to approve the resolution and to introduce the ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to new business. Item number 14, Housing Successor Agency and Housing Element Annual Progress Reports approval. And we have Sandy Council, Housing Manager, presenting to us.
Okay, is that coming over?
Don't think so. Wait, I don't even know. I don't even see your camera on. Maybe.
Oh.
That's the first step.
Ah.
There we go.
All I can say is thank God Eric is the mayor, because you're able to coach everybody through these glitches. I would not be that useful.
Is that showing up now?
Not yet.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
Just share screen.
Oh, no. Yeah, I did share screen. Clerk, what did I do or not do?
So you pressed the green share screen and nothing's happening? At the bottom?
Oh.
There you go.
There we go, right?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. All right. I'm Sandy Council, Housing Manager, and I'm going to give you an overview of two reports that we're required to submit to the state each year. The first one is the Housing Successor Report. Ever since the dissolution of the Redevelopment Agency in 2011, the city now manages the housing projects and the ongoing funds generated from the various housing loans that were made during the life of the redevelopment area. So this report is actually last fiscal year, 1920, so it ended last June. And there's just a few items that the report is supposed to describe for the community. So first of all, the agency received about $500,000, mostly from loan repayments during that time period, making a total fund balance of about $3.4 million. After the end of this reporting period in August, the City Council entered into a development agreement with Mid-Peninsula Housing for the affordable housing at the downtown sites, which is now called Kiku Crossing, for $2.9 million of that. So that will actually show up more in next year's report. The other thing that is required with these funds is there's some very specific income targeting of the funds. The legislation requires that most of the money go to the lowest income categories of our affordable housing range. And we haven't quite met the income targeting requirements yet, because we've only had 2 projects that we've used these successor funds for, and that was the Bay Meadows Montera housing project that was just occupied this winter, and several years ago, the acquisition of an apartment complex on Cypress. But once the housing at Kiku Crossing is built, we're targeting these funds for the lowest income units in that project, and will fully meet the requirements. So we're on track. Next is the housing element annual progress report. And this is for the calendar year 2020. So this just is for housing statistics up through December of 2020. This report, we describe the progress on our housing element programs. We look at our accomplishments for the regional housing needs allocation, the RENA number, and then it collects lots of data on housing projects as they progress from proposal to completion. Since this can take years for housing projects to go from application to approval to building permit, some of the projects show up over several years. So this report is prepared using the standard state form. It's a little cumbersome and difficult to read, so I'm going to provide a few highlights from the report. Also, I want to apologize that we discovered this morning that when the table was attached to the staff report, table B was inadvertently omitted last week. We found that out and corrected it this morning. So if anyone in the public looked at this report last week, there's a missing table, but it's there now. And we will also post the final copy of this report to the housing element webpage tomorrow. So to get into, drill down a little bit on some of the statistics, tables A and A2 generally have us report by income category, housing applications, that's the number of units that were submitted for approval and how many were approved. Housing applications in this case includes both planning applications as well as new units that don't require planning applications, such as ADUs, which are just over-the-counter building permits. And then the next category is also permits issued and permits completed. So this chart shows that in the calendar year of 2020, 1,577 housing units submitted applications, and during that fiscal year, whether or not they got approved, because if they applied like late in the year, December and November, it's likely that they weren't approved yet. And then also the units that were approved is 1,480. Again, some of those could have applied last year and got approved this year. That's why those numbers don't match. And then building permits issued 96. However, permits completed was 603. It's very likely that the pandemic had something to do with number of permits issued this year. Then to drill down, this is sort of a continuation of Philip's presentation where he was reporting the number of accessory dwelling units that were applied for. And then this chart shows those that actually got permits during this calendar year as well as those that were completed in the calendar year. And I think both Philip's chart, which was a graph, and this table, the main point of them is to show the increase in interest and in construction of ADUs the last couple of years as the revisions to the codes so far have indicated a strong list in ADUs, and it appears to be rising. One thing to note, I know in 2020 in Philip's presentation, he showed that 88 ADU applications came in, and this is showing only 52 of those as being permits issued. I did have a chance to quickly look at the permit report, and there's a lot of reasons why a permit isn't always issued, even though the unit is approved. For example, I found 25 permits where they were either ready, they're ready now, the person just hasn't paid and picked them up, and there was also 14 where they expired. So they went through, and for some reason, the owners didn't follow through. Again, I feel like it's very possible that the pandemic and perhaps the ability of people to finance these units, there could be lots of reasons why people aren't moving forward this year as compared to other years. And then the RENA progress to date shows how the city's doing by income category. And this is permits issued, this table. This is the official table for tracking the city's accomplishments toward our RENA progress. We're in year 5 of an 8-year program. And as you can see in 2020, not very many building permits were issued compared to the prior years. However, we had 3 major housing projects approved during that calendar year, representing 1,476 units, 325 of them that are affordable. So again, it's just a lot of this is just a timing issue. When a project came in, when it gets approved, how long it takes to get the construction drawings together for permits to be issued. And in order to be counted in this table, the permit has to be issued. So those are just the highlights that I pulled out of the report. I'm happy to answer any other of your questions.
That's the end of the presentation?
Yes, thank you.
You didn't have the typical the end slide.
I do, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, now I know that.
Thank you for reminding me that I mentioned that we'd be posting the report on the website. And so I did want to put the link here and give you just a picture of what that webpage looks like so that people can go look at that if they would like.
Thank you for that excellent presentation, Sandy. And it looks like Councilmember Pappen has a question.
Oh, no question. It's just that given the amount of work that you have to go through for these reports, I don't think there ever is an end. So maybe that wasn't unjustifiable, but terrific work, terrific work.
Okay, any other council members have questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I would like to open up public comment.
Mr. Mayor, I have one hand raised. One moment.
Hi, Council.
Our first speaker is Angela Solis.
Hi, Council. My name is Angela Solis, and I'm an organizer with the Housing Leadership Council. Our council is dedicated to working to build inclusive, equitable, and healthy communities where all people can access affordable homes and the resource they need to thrive in our community. We organize to ensure that anyone who works, lives, or grows up in San Mateo County has a home. First of all, I'd like to recognize the hard work that the council puts into building affordable homes in our community. The need for affordable homes has only increased since the pandemic, as we've seen a rise in homelessness and need for safe homes. According to the Bay Area Equity Atlas, over 137,000 Bay Area renter households are behind on rent. Those same renters face an estimated $488 million in rent debt, which rounds up to about $3,600 per household. 87% of those are people of color, and 81% of those renters make less than $75,000 a year. In San Mateo County specifically, 7,900 households, including 4,800 children, are at imminent risk of eviction and homelessness. We also can't and shouldn't ignore that the brunt of the economic fallout has disproportionately affected Black, Latinx, and immigrant communities. And now they're at even higher risk of eviction. And I'd just like to say that it would be in our community's best interest to work toward meeting the numbers that have been proposed by the current regional plan to build and maintain affordable housing in our city. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the next speaker is Lisa Diaz-Nash.
Hello again. Quickly, I would just like to thank Sandy Council and her team for being some of the most cooperative, collaborative, really passionate city staff people that I've ever run across. Every question I've ever asked them, they've come back with answers and given me other sources to look at. And I think they are an incredible resource for everyone in our city. So just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have no other speakers.
Okay, great. I'll close public comment, bring it back to council for comments.
There's nothing for us to adopt, is there?
I do not believe so. You just well, let's hear from Deputy Mayor Bonilla and then we can figure out what.
Yeah, the agenda says we're supposed to approve the report and the housing element annual progress as submitted by to the State Department of Housing Community Development. So I just want to say that once again, if you look at the slides that were presented, Sandy showed them, but also if you go down to, I believe it's page 3 in the staff report, you can see that our performance on moderate income housing is zeros all the way down. So it's really hard to finance missing middle, which is what this is, moderate rate, missing middle housing. I just want to say there is some hope on the horizon. I'm a member of the Strategic Options Working Group at HART, where I'm a member of the board there. And we've been having a series of special meetings as this ad hoc committee to review ways that other jurisdictions to the south and to the north of us have really stepped up the game. So HART is going to be turning into a different kind of player, seeking different kinds of funding. And I believe we're going to be able to purchase some existing buildings and provide some of this missing middle housing. So at least that's my very strong hope that we'll be able to help people who currently are having a very difficult time living here to be able to stay here. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments and or motion?
Thank you, Sandy. I move that we approve the report.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Can you call roll?
Okay, Councilmember Gothels.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Bonilla.
Yes.
Councilmember Pappen.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
And Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
And thanks again, Sandy, for the presentation, all the work.
Thank you. Good night.
All right.
Mike, I was just kidding. It's not past your bedtime.
Pretty all right. That leads us to item number 15. And I definitely want to thank Supervisor and former San Mateo Mayor Groom and Mike Callagher for being with us at this late hour. We appreciate it. And the item is County of San Mateo Homelessness Initiative. And we have, says here, Drew is going to be presenting, or how's this? But it looks like Mike's going to be presenting.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Rodriguez, members of the council, Mr. Corbett, Mr. Mason. I really appreciate this opportunity to spend a few minutes with you, and I'm going to go through these slides very quickly because I know it's been a long day for all of you. But if I could first turn it over to Supervisor Groom, who I think would like to say a few words.
Are you with us, Carol?
And some computer problems. So Why don't we save Supervisor Groom to the end, and I'll try to go through this very quickly if we can go through the next slide, please. Thank you. So this chart really quickly shows you the 2019 homeless count, which really totaled at that point in time, and it was a point in time count, 1,512. And you could see how it was broken down through the various modes of those experiencing homelessness. You can see certainly sheltered made up the most, and we did have certainly many on the street in tents and encampments. We go to the next slide. So this is kind of an indication really here of what cities were experiencing most of the homelessness in the county, and these 5 cities really accounted for just over 70% of the homeless in that particular count. And let me just say that count is just a point in time. We know that it's much higher than that, and certainly we never really capture an accurate number of that. Redwood City really accounted for just about twice as many as any other city in the county. And with the exception of people living in cars, Redwood City really had the most homeless in every other category and twice as many on the street. Go to the next slide, please. So we really have, and you've heard this many times, adopted the housing first motto here in the county. And really, we know without housing, without putting somebody in a house, you really can't get them to permanent housing without going through temporary housing, because there's just certainly not enough. You can't get them employed. You can't have enough money to save for rent. You really can't address the health needs and challenges that they have and the lifestyle issues that they have. So the primary purpose that we try to employ is to get people in housing before we do anything else. We go to the next slide, please. So we see here really the process of for those experiencing homelessness. And really it's through that single intake where we do the assessment of the homeless services at the core. And as you can see on the right-hand side, starting at the top, permanent housing is what we try to go for, but very rarely do we get someone in permanent housing right off the street. So it really has to be a process they go through. The second mode we look at is diversion, and that is, are there friends or families that we can help pay for rent for this individual to get them in more of a stable setting where we can start addressing some of the issues. And then third, of course, is the emergency shelter beds and the family units. And for our families, we have apartment complexes, which you're very familiar with, to try to address some of their needs. The key point really is that if housing is available, it's always the first option, but it's very rarely utilized. Here's a really just kind of an indication of where the affordable housing development map is in the county. You talked about some of the affordable housing, the great work that you're doing in the city of San Mateo. And this is what it looks like, just a snapshot throughout the county. If we can go to the next one, we talked a little bit about this. The Sandy Council talked a little bit about this affordable housing. It's really defined by HUD as the housing costs, including utilities, that are no more than 30% of the household's gross income. We know too many in this county can't even achieve that. As we go to the next slide, you can see that, let's just, for example, look at the extremely low, what they can afford for a 2-bedroom unit, which equals 30% of the household income, is a mere $1,174 in this county, which doesn't even get you remotely close to a studio apartment in San Mateo County. Next slide, please. You can see some of the great success stories here with the Colma Village affordable housing, 65 1-bedroom units for those formerly homeless veterans. And if we can go to the next slide, we can see throughout the county really where our homeless shelters are, with Safe Harbor to the north in South San Francisco by the airport there, run by Samaritan House, and Maple Street Shelter in Redwood City, run by Life Moves, and then We Hope in East Palo Alto, run by Pastor Baines. And they are just doing incredible work addressing the needs of our homeless. Go to the next slide, please. So we can see the emergency shelter beds and family units spread out throughout the county right now. You can see where they are and how they really are spread out and serving different needs. Here's some other, if we go to the next slide. I'm sure you've all been down to view this, the Haven Family House in Menlo Park, which has 23 temporary housing units. Certainly not enough, but they do a great job down there. Next one you're very familiar with. These are the 30 temporary housing units in the city of San Mateo. And the next one, the 15 temporary housing units in the city of Daly City. So our goal is really to reach functional zero. And what does that mean? Does that mean, we're going to place everyone in a residence? No, it's really having that place to put the unsheltered homeless in this county who choose assistance and want to enter into a shelter and temporary permanent housing. We know that some will resist this, and that's why we have the hot team out there that will continue to work. And sometimes it takes many, many attempts, as we know from some of the experiences we've had in San Mateo, to get people housed. We go to the next one, please. So we can look at this, and really the goal of that we have is that the permanent housing for everyone. And it's going to take a while to get there. So we have some interim steps that we have to utilize. And you can see where we were at the pre-COVID. And then during the COVID, how we had to decompress at Safe Harbor and Maple Street and We Hope, and we lost beds there. So we really resorted to the use of temporary, that 184 hotel rooms. It was really a lifesaver to be able to use these, not only for the motels that were experiencing really no business at all during the pandemic, but really to get these people off the street. And it allowed us to take an additional 80 individuals off the street who are at high risk because of their medical conditions of contracting and really potentially dying from COVID-19. So we were able to do that, but that model is simply not sustainable because of the cost of those rooms. So you can look at this, and really we want to offer a bed to every homeless adult who's seeking shelter in this county. And the key here will be that those temporary beds, about 130 of them, to just get to the near-term need. Now we hope, and we know that we will build a navigation center, and that's where you can see down at the bottom on the right-hand side, about the 200, and we believe it's 244 rooms that we'll be able to build, which will really give us capacity in this county. But in order to do that, and we'll see a slide, I think, next, we'll see we own this square block down there at the 1580 Maple Street. We need to level it and start over and put that navigation center in place. But in order to do that, we need to decompress that center, get all those people out and get them housed immediately. The sooner we can get them housed, the sooner we can knock this down and get that navigation center going. That will really have a model of taking people in congregate care on the main floor, but building 100 studios, I believe it's 120 studios above ground, up to 5 floors, which will then give people a passage out of homelessness and independence in some of these individual cases. And the navigation center really is it's really for the housing of really overcoming those low barrier service enriched services that we provide people, to give them the temporary housing while also providing them with incredible case management and really wrapping around health services and jobs and really trying to reduce those barriers. And some of those barriers we know are cases those experiencing domestic violence who need someplace to go that they can be safe. Those who have pets who don't want to come in off the street because there's nowhere to put their pets. Storage of possessions and privacy concerns. And we see all those every day. So let's talk about the Pacific. Let's go to the functional zero. We can see here that that we do need to get those beds in place, and really that number that we have to really come up with is 126 right now to get where we need to go. And we've got 74 of those in the Pacific Inn and another 52 at the Coast Side Inn. So let's talk about those real quick and what we're doing at the Coast Side Inn, or at the Pacific Inn. We'll start with that one first. 74 rooms located in Redwood City. All rooms were furnished with linens and everything, reception area, office space, laundry rooms, a breakfast room for their guests there. Really, if we go to the next slide, the homeless shelter services provided by Samaritan House. They're just getting started down there. We're doing some renovations as we speak to get it ready for those who are going to be occupying it. And right now more than ever we need it with COVID-19 and the decompression of one of our main hotels that we were using up in the city of Burlingame. You can see also it's a 24-hour, 7 days a week staffing model that we have people on site always. Housing focused around case management and the locator specialists, which are very important for housing. Meals are provided. 3 meals a day are provided, and then connections with all the other services, employment, health services, and addiction services that they need. Coastside Inn is our other recent purchase in Half Moon Bay, 52 guest rooms, again, all furnished, reception area, laundry room, breakfast area. We're in the process right now of determining who will be the operator. That should be announced probably by the end of this week, as I think they're just finishing up there. There's a preference on those from Half Moon Bay occupying those rooms. And again, 24-hour staffing, housing-focused case management, and wraparound service. And let me just say, we're putting more services into these 2 hotels than we ever have before in any type of model, because we believe that those enriched services will really help people with that path out of homelessness and into prolonged housing. So the benefits, we've touched on some of them, and we can go to the next slide after that. Really the benefits are the privacy and safety for the individuals, and more people are willing to come off the street if they get that privacy and safety. The consistency with case management, the greater potential for medical appointments, more opportunities to apply for permanent housing and social services, and all those wraparound services that you see. So part of our plan, if we can go to the next slide, is the potential purchase of 2 motels here in the city of San Mateo on El Camino. The appraisals are underway, and we're anxious to receive that appraisal back within any day now, really, probably sometime this week, to see if it's within our budget and within the selling point of the owners of the hotels. We've got an application for general plan conformance that has been submitted, and I believe it's scheduled for a public hearing in front of the Planning Commission on March 23rd. If purchased, the next steps would be to really get together with the community and talk about opportunities here. These hotels are located at one is a Stone Villa located at 2175 South El Camino Real. That's 44 units, and the other one is 2010 South ECR, and that's the Katrina Hotel with 57 units. Of course, like the other ones, we would, if we did purchase these with the city of San Mateo, we would negotiate some offset for loss of TOT. It's not something that we'd be able to cover fully, but we would certainly work with Mr. Corbett to offset that. We'd also enter into an MOU with the city of San Mateo, like we have with the other cities, to really understand what the services will be providing and our responsibility to the community. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or if Supervisor Groom would like to say something, I would certainly yield to her.
I think you're still on mute, Supervisor Groom.
We're all going to be talking about for years. You're still on mute.
There you go.
Thanks for letting us come by tonight. We are so committed to solving the homeless problem. We are so committed to treating the people with dignity and respect. And we think that the motel program is nicer than a shelter because you have some privacy. The other thing that we're so proud of is that many of our homeless people in this county work. And again, if they have a better place to live, they'll be better employees. They'll feel fresher when they go to work in the morning. The services that we can provide too are all county services: mental health services, physical health services, job, computer skills, job training a little bit, and get help them. We help them figure out a way to maybe we'll help them get some clothes so that they'll have a better look when they go to work. It's all of those things that bring dignity back to people, which is what we're really trying to do. All of our county services are available. We deliver 3 meals a day, so that they've got some and good nutrition. That's always been very important to me, that we make sure that we did the nutritious meals. So we think we've got a program that's workable. The idea, of course, is to get them out of these and into more permanent housing, which we're prepared to do. And so in our other places where we have people living in their hotels and the motels, it seems to be working, seems to be good, better quality of life for them. And so we told Mr. Corbett earlier that we will do town halls we will come and meet with all the residents and talk about this and talk about the successes we've had in our other locations, and hopefully be partners, and hopefully continue to reduce homelessness and get people prepared to move on. So thanks again.
Okay, thank you both for the presentations. And I'm sure we have a lot of questions. I'll start with Councilmember Pappen.
Just a quick question. How long do you think the average stay will be for each resident that will come to these hotels?
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilmember Pappen. But it's hard to answer because we don't know what the available housing stock will be, and obviously we want to get people out of these motel settings as quickly as possible once we get them stabilized and they save enough money for rent and other things. But really, it's going to depend on the housing. So I know in Half Moon Bay we've had a couple successes in the 10 beta test rooms that we're running right now. I think we've moved a couple people out into permanent housing. So we're happy about that, but we know there's a limit to that. And but the main thing is we don't want to just maintain folks in a shelter type setting. We really want to try to give them the resources and the wraparound services necessary to get on to the next step and find permanent housing. Some of the things you're doing tonight, like EDUs and different things, will certainly hopefully help us increase the housing stock in the county.
Well, we do what we can. Anyway, I'm excited about this. I'm very interested in the empathy and compassion it has. And I think it could be very effective at making a real difference. So I'm interested in exploring it, but you don't want to hear from me just yet, Mayor.
Additional questions, Councilmember Gotels.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to applaud the Supervisor Groom and County Manager Callaghan for their leadership. This is a brilliant county initiative. It makes me proud to be part of local government. And whatever we can do to help support this, we appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, Councilmember Gotels.
Okay, other questions, preferably questions not disguised as comment questions, and then we can hear from the public, and then we'll get back to questions. So Deputy Mayor Bernier. Might be on mute.
Well, because I didn't have a question, so I've lowered my hand.
Oh, okay. All right, so I guess a question I have is, could you talk a little bit more about the long-term plans for these properties?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Our hope is that someday, and we don't know when, that we'll have enough permanent housing to end these shelters and the use of them as shelters, and rather convert them to permanent housing, low-income housing. That would be our goal with all of these hotels. When that will be hard to say, but we hope, and that really is our goal. Our long-term goal is to end homelessness in this county and convert these individual motel into low-income housing.
Great. And the last question is, I know that you did extensive kind of community outreach in Pacifica. Can you talk a little bit about some of the outreach you've done that you did there? And it seemed like in general, the community, which was maybe a little bit skeptical in the beginning, came to learn more about the county's approach and the program. Can you just talk a little bit more about your experience in Pacifica with the community outreach?
Yeah, in Half Moon Bay and even in Redwood City, we were able to have town hall meetings, and that was an opportunity for the public to really ask questions and detailed questions about how they'd be run. And I think that most people were fearful that the county would just open these places and let them, run by themselves, people coming and going at all hours. It's not that way at all. There's rules in place in all these rooms. There is on-site 24-hour presence by representatives, whoever we hire as operators of these hotels. It's pretty much been Samaritan House and Life Moves to date. Extremely accomplished operators who know this population, know how to work with this population. And we wrap around services. People can't come and go. They can't have people in their room. There's no drinking or use of drugs in the rooms. There's all kinds of rules that have to be followed. This is a place that we want to blend in with the community. We want them to shop locally. We want them to use the local transportation. And these two particular hotels have great amenities around it, whether it's social service amenities, transportation, stores, restaurants, those type of things that we hope these individuals will utilize.
Mayor Rodriguez, I would just add to what Mike just said, is that we have been as open and honest as we possibly can, and have explained how we're going to do how we're going to serve the food, what kind of credentialed staff we're going to have on site. We've tried to answer every question as much as we can, and we have somebody on duty all the time. So if there is a problem, there will be somebody on site that can take care of that problem until they can get more help to come in.
And Mayor, you were right. There was a lot of skepticism at the beginning, and now I think the communities are more along the line is what can we do to help? What can we do to welcome these individuals and make sure they're successful?
Thank you very much, both of you, for that response. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, so I'd like to open up public comment.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, our first speaker is Lisa Diaz-Nash.
Hello again, everyone. I would just like to second my support for this initiative. I'm so excited that San Mateo is being considered to have two places where the program could be housed. I'm a great supporter of Samaritan House, and I think they do just incredible end-to-end work. And I think one thing we have all learned during this pandemic is that so many of us are just one step away from falling off the cliff. So I think there is tremendous openness for this in our community, and I look forward to seeing it move forward and a great partnership. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kyle Cruz.
Hi, I think this is a great idea. I think that after looking into it, some people might be skeptical, but I think, do the community outreach and kind of let everybody understand what this program is really about. And I think it's going to be a great idea that's going to help out a lot of people. And really, I think it's going to not just it's going to help out, the people that need help the most and help them get into a transitional program. And it's also going to help, our community as a whole by not just helping out the people on the streets, but helping people that might want to help them out, so to speak. And I think that overall, this is a program to really look into. And I think that assuming that you do the proper public outreach, I think a lot of people will be on board with it as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Deborah Leshane.
Oh, hi, everyone. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this effort. I think we need so much more of this. I'm a little concerned that there's only 14 beds for youth. I'm a high school teacher, and I know that there is a need for youth to have a safe place as well, and homelessness affects them as well. And the other thing is, I was wondering, if the program would employ some of those individuals who are in need of employment as well as housing. That could be part of it, training to do the food service, for example, and to build those skill sets. So anyway, I'm just, I co-own a home in San Mateo, and I would really support this effort and more efforts like this, and appreciate everyone's efforts. Thank you.
We have a very active vocational rehab program, especially a culinary program that goes along with that. And I think that that's a good idea, and we'll see where it's appropriate and see what we can do.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Next speaker is Adam Lorraine.
Good evening, council, staff, and Supervisor Groom and County Manager. Thank you very much for being here today. And I just wanted to quickly echo supportive comments for this idea and initiative. Clearly, I'm proud to have it be considered in our city. We've seen a number of updates in other parts of our county. So I'm glad to see it here, and I look forward to updates. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next speaker is Kuehler.
The best way has been shown in many countries to help homelessness is to give the homeless homes. So I support it on that basis alone. Thank you.
Okay, and next speaker is Ryan Montesheni.
Hi there, good evening. I'd just like to call in support of this proposal. Thank you so much to the council for being open and in support, and also to Supervisor Groom and County Manager Callaghan for being here. I truly think that, especially since historically homeless centers have often been located in places that are further away from the important and necessary amenities and services that our homeless community members need to get their help. I think that it's especially great that we're considering places that are close to transit, to services, and also that the county is working on a new navigation center with more services at its Maple Street location, which is a little bit off the beaten path in terms of its proximity to existing services. So I think that all in all, both in plans for Maple Street and also the El Camino properties, this is a really important, much needed, and popularly supported program. Thank you very much.
And next speaker is Jordan Grimes.
Good evening again, Council. Jordan Grimes, speaking both as a lifelong resident of the city as well as political director of Peninsula Young Democrats. Just wanted to share our group's support of these projects. It's really incredibly exciting to see the county pursuing these hotels. And we're really looking forward to organizing in support of these projects and welcoming the new residents who will live in them into our community. So again, just want to express appreciation to the county for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
And next speaker is Seema Patel.
Good evening again, council members. I just wanted to reiterate the previous comments and say that I'm so excited that the county and city are considering these projects. I think, as other commenters have noted, the best thing we can do to help the unhoused is to give them housing. So I look forward to hearing more about these projects and doing what I can to support them. Thank you.
And next speaker is Joel Brink-Cohn.
My name is Joel Cohn. I'm calling in support of the Project Home Key. I think it's good that we're making efforts to house the unhoused, and I'm glad that we're not trying to shut them away somewhere far away from public services and amenities, because what they need more than anything else is access to the same public spaces that the rest of us have. Thank you.
And I have no other hands raised.
Great, thank you. I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to City Council for comments, and we'll start with Deputy Mayor Bonilla.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really want to express very deep gratitude to County Manager Callaghan and Supervisor Groom, and say that I can't express how much I appreciate the really well thought out and well executed program that the county has put forth and is accomplishing to do exactly what needs to be done for homeless people, and that's to give them a place to live, a roof over the head, some services to help people get up off their feet, to move forward through life, to get onto a better path. It's really just, I can't express the gratitude that I feel. So thank you very much.
Very kind, Rick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bonilla, and we'll go with Councilmember Pappen.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in again. Yeah, I am very interested, as I said, in exploring this further. I think this endeavor really represents creative empathy and compassion. And I think the services that the county is prepared to throw into this mix is what really will have a positive and lasting change on those that are housed at these sites. So let's see what we can do. We'll wait for the appraisals.
Mm-hmm.
Great. More comments? Councilmember Lee.
Well, I'll join in and express my deep gratitude for the strategy and approach and the execution and leadership and courage that is demonstrated by our supervisors in really taking a human-centered approach. And I've heard all along from our electeds that we see our homeless population as a part of this community, because in fact they are a part of our community. They are working families. They are our teachers and after school educators. There are 69-year-old seniors. They're the directors of the Vendome. These people play an essential part of our community. And I think that seeing their humanity and bringing forward strategies like this one and really maximizing opportunities as we are right now in this moment is us putting into practice one of the key lessons from the pandemic, which is that we are only as safe as our most vulnerable community members. That is one of the number one takeaways from this moment. And the chance to create short-term shelter beds in a way that's COVID safe, but also create a long-term opportunity to fill the unmet need of our low-income affordable housing and permanent supportive housing, which we almost have none, is an opportunity that this community cannot miss. And so it's really heartening to hear the support from the callers who've come in, from the faith leaders who've also chimed in, and I'm really pleased, to see the support among our council as well. So this is a proud moment to be San Matean.
Okay, I'll chime in with some comments. Well, first off, of course, thank you, Supervisor Groom, County Manager Callaghy, and the entire Board of Supervisors. I think all deserve our appreciation. Thank you for your leadership. As I've been talking with residents this year, this very tough year, I mean, one question that comes up now more than ever, and it never really used to really come up that much, is like, what is the city doing to take care of its homeless? And I think especially during the pandemic, we've seen more people forced to sleep in tents. We've seen more RVs. We've seen people sleeping in cars, and I really think that this initiative obviously will go a long way towards helping us address the issue head on and finally reach functional zero homelessness within the city of San Mateo and throughout the county. And if these hotels are indeed eventually converted into below market housing, then the initiative is going to help our community address another crisis, a longer term crisis that we're facing, and that's our housing affordability. We saw in a presentation earlier today just how lousy of a job we are doing, and frankly, of building very low income housing. And this would go a long way towards meeting that need as well. I'm also just very impressed. I agree with everything that the other council members have said about what this is going to do for the homeless, but I also just really appreciate the county's approach in bringing the community in at the earliest stages. This isn't like some sort of done deal where everything's all sorted out. I think you're partnering with the community, and I'm very convinced that you're going to work very closely with us to ensure that all the questions are answered and all the concerns are addressed. As far as the location of these hotels, I think they're about as ideal as we could possibly ask for. And with everything taken into consideration, this initiative looks to be like a very positive development for our city and the region. And I very much look forward to seeing it progress. So thank you both again. And if there's no further comments here, I'll close this item.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And you got muted applause.
Or you can stay until we actually finish the whole thing. I think Mike, do we already lose Mike?
What did you say? I'm sorry, I missed it.
I said they can stay until we finish the whole meeting, but it looks like we already lost Mike.
Yes, we did. Okay, so we are going to, let's see, the next item is going to be a closed session item And I believe we're gonna see if there's any public comment before we move into closed session.
I'm going to leave before closed session.
Yes, you deserve the rest of the night off, Supervisor Grimes. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment, and I believe you were going to do adjournment before leaving this open meeting.
Yes, I was just getting to that.
Yay, thank you.
Okay, but thank you for reminding me, just in case I would have forgotten. Tonight, we adjourn in the memory of Bob Cousins, a retired employee who spent his entire career working for San Mateo Public Works Department. He began working for San Mateo in 1960 as an engineering aide and ended his career running the survey division after 38.5 years of service to our city. He was an accomplished photographer and on multiple occasions had his award-winning artwork displayed in the halls of City Hall. He and his wife, Sue, of 29 years, loved birding, which took them to over 11 countries and to many states where Bob would photograph their adventures. Bob was preceded in death by his first wife in 1990, and in 2018, his only child, Jeff, who also worked for San Mateo in our Parks and Rec department when he unexpectedly passed away. Bob wrote his own obituary, which included these closing statements. Quote, Bob's life contained many struggles, but as he told Sue, I look back and I wouldn't change anything. I'm well satisfied with my life. On the back of his business card is an image entitled, quote, look beyond the gray days, end quote. Don't read this as Bob being an optimist. He was a realist. The message was meant for other people. So we close our meeting tonight with Bob's words to, quote, look beyond the gray days. And
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
We did not ask for reports.
I was just finishing that and getting to the reports.
Okay.
I was going to have a moment of silence, but if we want to do the reports. Okay, thank you. Okay, how about reports and announcements? Anyone?
I have one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's all over my screen. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In my position at the Board of Directors and the Executive Committee of Peninsula Clean Energy, I have had the pleasure to be involved in the creation of a new joint powers authority, which is called California Community Power. It's currently populated with 8 smaller jurisdictional, like our PCE, joint power authorities. Its second board meeting ever since its creation last month is going to be happening this Wednesday, March 17th at 1 p.m. Anybody who's interested in learning more or seeing the beginning of a new agency, which is going to be providing much cleaner energy for us going into the future, can watch this meeting at, the name of it is California Community Power, so it's cacommunitypower.org. So thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Anybody else have any announcements? Councilmember Pepin?
So I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening with my voice, so I'll bear through this. But I did want to announce that you know, I sit on the San Mateo County Joint Powers Authority for the Express Lanes, and they're in the middle of their equity outreach. And this Thursday will be a community outreach program that will be held and they will have interpretation available for Spanish, Cantonese, and Mandarin. And the time is March 18th from 5:30 to 6:30. And you can go on San Mateo County Express Lanes website to find out the exact Zoom link to join the meeting. But we welcome everyone to join because we really want to hear about the equity programs that they would like to see funded from the revenues that are generated by the Express Lanes. So all are welcome. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Last call. Okay, so we're going to move into closed session on number 16, conference with labor negotiator. See you there.